Why does one aquarium sit clean for months, while another one goes green, no matter how hard you scrub it? The scrubbing was never the difference. 10 small things decide whether a tank stays clean on its own, and almost none of them happen with a sponge in your hand. 30 years keeping fish, about 15 of them behind the counter of my own shop, and the number of people who walked in convinced they were lazy was something else. They were not lazy. Most of them were working harder than the guy with the spotless tank down the street. They were just fighting the tank instead of setting it up so it stopped making a mess in the first place. 10 of those setups are coming your way. And stay to the end, because the last thing I give you is a water change habit that decides whether your tank is clear an hour after you finish, or milky until the next day, and it costs nothing but a bucket sitting overnight. The idea underneath all 10 is worth saying up front, because it makes each one obvious. A dirty-looking tank is almost never a cleaning problem. It is a light problem, a flow problem, or a dissolved organics problem, and you cannot scrub your way out of any of the three. Algae grows because something is feeding it light and nutrients. Debris piles up because water is not moving it anywhere. Water looks dull because things you cannot see are dissolved in it. Fix the cause, and the tank does most of the work itself, which is why the guy with the effortless tank looks like he is cheating. If you have kept a tank for any length of time, you already half knew this. You notice that some tanks stay clean with almost no attention, and others need work every weekend, and the owners are doing roughly the same things. The difference was decided at setup, usually before a fish ever went in. First one happens before a single fish goes in, and if you missed it, you have been paying for it ever since. Rinse your substrate until the water runs clear. Substrate is just the gravel or sand on the bottom, and a fresh bag of it is coated in fine dust from the bagging process. Dump that in dry, and you get a tank that looks like somebody poured milk in it, and it can hang around for a week or two. Put it in a bucket, run a hose into it, stir it with your hand, pour the cloudy water off, and repeat until it comes off clean. On a bag of sand that can take 10 or 12 rinses, roughly the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. Nobody enjoys it. Everybody who skips it regrets it. I have skipped it, in a hurry, on a tank I wanted running that afternoon. Spent the next 2 weeks looking at a hazy tank, and a filter I kept cleaning for no reason, because the dust was never going to be caught by a filter, it was just going to settle out on its own schedule. Slower would have been faster. Second, and this is the single biggest one on the list, keep the tank out of direct sunlight. A window is a free algae generator. Algae needs light and nutrients, and a few hours of afternoon sun a day gives it more light than any aquarium fixture you own. I have watched people buy an algae eater, then a bottle, then a better filter, chasing a green tank that was sitting 3 feet from a south-facing window the whole time. No cleanup crew outworks the sun. If the tank is already there and it cannot move, blinds on that window during the afternoon will do more for you than anything you could buy. And the same logic applies to your own light. Running an aquarium light 10 or 12 hours a day because it looks nice is feeding algae for 6 of those hours. 6 to 7 hours on a timer, about the length of a work shift, grows plants fine and starves the algae of the surplus. Third, when your water goes green, cover the tank instead of buying something. Green water is a free-floating algae bloom, meaning the algae is suspended in the water column rather than growing on surfaces, and every single cell is too small for your filter to catch, which is exactly why filtration does nothing for it. What kills it is darkness. Wrap the tank in a blanket or trash bags. No light at all, no peeking, for 3 full days. Feed nothing during that time, and your fish will be fine. A healthy fish goes far longer than 3 days without a meal in the wild. On day 4, you pull the cover and do a water change, and the water is usually clear. A blackout works on green water because you are starving one organism that lives in the water column, and your plants and your bacteria colony ride it out fine for that long. What it will not do is touch algae growing on your glass and decor. That stuff has a foothold, and it will still be there when the cover comes off. Most people fail this by leaving a gap or peeking on day 2, and a little light is all a bloom needs to hang on. There is a store days version of this I watched play out more than once. Somebody would come in with a jar of pea soup green water, and I would tell them about the blackout, free, no purchase. And about half of them would buy a green water treatment anyway on the way out, because 3 days in the dark sounded too simple to work. The ones who tried the blanket came back and told me about it like they had discovered something. The ones who bought the bottle usually came back for another bottle. I know how that sounds coming from a guy who ran a shop. Cover the tank first and let your own water settle the argument. Everything in this video, and the full 101 secret system behind it, is in the Aquarist's Bible. 204 pages covering the tap water that's quietly poisoning your fish, and the $5 fix for it, the nitrogen cycle explained the way nobody at the store ever bothers to, the $3 filter upgrade that doubles what your filter can handle, the overfeeding that causes the deaths nobody admits to, easy plants that actually live, and the cleanup crew that eats each type of algae so you stop buying the wrong one. Plus a quick reference card you can tape inside your stand, so you always know the right move when a fish looks off. If you are tired of testing your water, doing everything right, and still losing fish for no reason you can explain, this is the reference you have been waiting for. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Fourth, aim your filter outflow so debris has somewhere to go. That is the spout or nozzle where water returns to the tank, and most people point it wherever it happened to sit when they installed it. Angle it so the current sweeps along the bottom and carries loose waste toward your intake, which is the tube that pulls water into the filter. Do that, and your tank starts collecting its own mess in one spot, instead of piling detritus in the same back corner every week. You know that corner. Every tank has one, that patch behind the driftwood where the gunk accumulates no matter what, and it exists because water is not reaching it. That is a dead spot, and it is a flow problem, not a dirt problem. A rough target most keepers use is turning your tank volume over somewhere around 5 times an hour. So a 30-gallon tank wants a filter rated near 150 gallons an hour. But the rating on the box assumes an empty pipe and a clean filter, and neither of those is your tank. What matters more is where that flow actually goes. I have seen an oversized canister on a tank with a corner full of waste, purely because the return was pointed at the front glass and nothing ever reached the back left. Watch a pinch of flake food after you feed and see where it travels. Wherever it settles and stays is where you need to point something. Fifth, the oily film on your surface. Most people notice it and assume it is normal, and it kind of is. It comes from protein and oils off your food and from your hands and the air. What it does is sit there like a lid and slow gas exchange, meaning oxygen struggles to get in and carbon dioxide struggles to get out. 2 ways to fix it. A surface skimmer attachment clips onto your filter intake for about $10 or $15 and pulls that top layer in continuously. Or lay a sheet of paper towel flat on the water, let it soak 2 seconds, and lift it straight off, and the film comes with it. That trick costs nothing and works in about the time it takes to say it. The film is also a decent early warning system, and this is the part people miss. A tank that suddenly develops a heavy surface slick usually got there from overfeeding, or from something dying somewhere you have not found yet. So when it shows up out of nowhere on a tank that never had it, do not just wipe it off and move on. Take a look at how much you are feeding and count your fish. Sixth, if you want water that is clear rather than just clean, run a polishing resin. Purigen from Sechem is the one I have used for years. A small bag of white beads that sits in your filter and pulls out dissolved organic compounds, which is the invisible stuff that makes water look faintly yellow or dull without ever looking dirty. A bag runs about $15, treats 100 gallons, and the part people miss is that you can recharge it in a bleach solution and reuse the same bag for years. It goes from white to dark brown as it loads up, so it tells you when it is done. That is a rare thing in this hobby, a product that shows its own work. One honest limit on it, because somebody will buy it expecting a miracle. Purigen will not fix green water. It does not touch a bloom of free-floating algae, and it will not clean up a tank that is dirty because it is overstocked. What it does is take water that is already reasonably clean and make it look like the fish are floating in nothing. That is it. If your tank looks bad rather than dull, fix the cause first and add the resin after, or you are just paying $15 to polish a problem. Seventh, and this is where I am going to save you money instead of spending it. Activated carbon is not a cleanliness product, and running it forever is the most common wasted purchase in the hobby. Carbon is a black granular media that absorbs certain compounds, and it is genuinely good at 3 jobs: pulling out medication after you finish treating a fish, removing the tea-colored tint from driftwood tannins, and clearing odor. What it is not is a permanent filtration step. It exhausts in roughly 3 to 4 weeks, and after that it is an expensive sponge sitting in your filter, doing nothing but taking up space where biomedia should be. I sold a lot of replacement carbon cartridges in my day. I stopped telling people it was mandatory once I did the math on what it was actually doing after week 4. Run the numbers yourself. A pack of replacement cartridges with carbon in them runs $8 or $10, and the box tells you to change them monthly, so that is roughly $100 a year. Over 5 years you are into it for $500, and for most of that time the carbon was inert, and you were also throwing away the bacteria colony growing on the cartridge every time you swapped it. Sit with that number for a second. $500 to make your filtration worse on a schedule. Nobody scammed anybody. The box just says what the box says, and no one ever explained what the black stuff was for. 8th, flush the slime out of your filter hoses once or twice a year. If you run a canister filter, the sealed unit that sits under the tank, those intake and return lines build a layer of biofilm, that thin living slime that coats every wet surface. It narrows the inside diameter of the hose without you seeing it, and lower flow means more debris settling in your tank. A flexible hose brush costs about $8, and it is genuinely satisfying, in a disgusting way, to see what comes out the first time. Which reminds me, cleaning the hoses is fine. Cleaning your biomedia is not. That sponge and ceramic is where your beneficial bacteria live, and you rinse that in old tank water only. While you have the hoses off, check the O-ring seal on the canister lid and give it a wipe. A dry or gritty O-ring is where the slow drips start, and a slow drip behind a stand goes unnoticed for months. Also worth saying, because everything in this hobby runs on power sitting inches from water, every cord should hang in a drip loop, meaning it dips below the outlet so water runs off the bottom instead of tracking into the socket, and that outlet belongs on a GFCI, the kind with the test and reset buttons. Look, everything I'm walking through here is in the Aquarist's Bible. 204 pages, all 101 field-tested secrets. Water chemistry made simple, the cycle done right. Filtration, substrate, feeding, easy plants, algae control, stocking, and the self-cleaning tank that mostly runs itself. Plus what to actually do when it goes wrong, with a quick reference card for the stand. 3 decades of fishroom knowledge in one place. No more mystery deaths. No more scrubbing green glass every week. No more fighting your tank and dumping money at the fish store. Link in the description. QR code on screen. 9th, and this one saves a new tank owner about $25, and a lot of worry. Brown algae in a new tank is a phase, not a failure. Those are diatoms, and they feed on silicates that leach out of fresh substrate and new water. Every new tank gets them, usually somewhere in the first 2 months. They coat the glass and the decor in a dusty brown film that wipes off easily, and then they run out of food and disappear on their own. What happens is somebody panics at week 6, drives to the store, buys something, and the diatoms clear up at week 7, which was going to happen anyway. Now they believe in the bottle forever. I do not blame anybody for that. The timing is genuinely convincing. If you want them gone faster, an otocinclus or a couple of nerite snails will graze that film off the glass while it lasts, and they are useful long after the diatoms are gone. Just do not add livestock to a tank that is only a few weeks old purely to fix an algae phase, because the tank is still settling, and you would be solving a cosmetic problem by adding a biological one. 10th, use a razor blade on glass, never on acrylic. Hard spots of green algae fuse to glass, and no sponge will touch them, but a single edge blade held at a low angle takes them off in one pass and does not scratch glass. On acrylic, that same blade leaves permanent gouges, and acrylic tanks are what most of the newer rimless setups are made from, so know which one you own before you go at it. In the silicone corner seams, use a plastic edge or an old credit card instead, because a blade in that corner can nick the seal, and the seal is the only thing holding several hundred pounds of water in place. Water runs about 8 1/3 pounds a gallon, so a filled 40-gallon with substrate is pushing 400 pounds, roughly 2 grown men standing on one small stand. There is a line where all 10 of these stop being the answer, and it is worth naming. Everything on this list handles appearance, algae, film, debris, dull water. None of it fixes a sick tank. If your fish are gasping at the surface, if you have got ammonia showing on a test, if there are white spots or rotting fins, put the razor blade down and deal with that first, because a spotless tank full of stressed fish is not the goal. And if you are running a reef or a saltwater system, the cleaning routine is a different animal. I am a freshwater guy, and I would rather tell you that than pretend. My brother-in-law does reef and never misses a chance to remind me his water is harder to keep clear than mine, usually right when I am eating. Which brings me to the one I saved, because it is the difference between a tank that looks finished when you walk away and one that stays hazy until tomorrow. Almost nobody does this, and it costs nothing. Do not refill straight from the tap. Fill your clean bucket the night before. Add your conditioner then. Drop in a spare heater and a cheap air stone, and let that water sit overnight. 3 things happen while you sleep. The temperature comes to match your tank, so you are not shocking anything with a 5-degree swing. The dissolved gases come out of solution, which is what those tiny bubbles clinging to the glass after a water change actually are. Tap water is pressurized and full of gas, and it releases into your tank as a fine haze. And the conditioner has time to fully do its work, rather than being dumped in as the water pours. Across the tanks in my fish room, the difference is obvious enough that I stopped doing it any other way about 15 years back. Same tank, same change. One is clear in 20 minutes, and one is cloudy until the next morning. One fish room is not a controlled study, but try it once and let your own eyes settle it. That is the whole habit. A bucket, an overnight, and the last thing on your maintenance list stops being a thing you notice at all. The people whose tanks look effortless are not scrubbing more than you. They set the thing up so it stops generating work, then they leave it alone and let it look good. Pick the 2 off this list that apply to your tank right now, probably the sunlight one and wherever your outflow is pointing, and handle those this weekend. Then watch what your glass looks like in a month compared to the last one. That is the tank telling you it was never about how hard you were working.